Welcome to Sollu Kaburz podcast, India versus England Test Series special. Boy, we couldn't wait. We couldn't wait for another Test Series to begin after that wonderful victory, what India had achieved in Australia. We were just counting days for this series, and here it is. It's right here in this week, and we're going to talk about all things India versus England. And with me, I have Rob Johnston. If you are a Cricbuzz fan, if you follow Cricbuzz quite frequently, you must have seen Rob Johnston's columns every time England plays. And thank you very much for doing this, Rob. I'm a big fan of your columns, and you're one of my best favorite English reporters to be writing on Cricbuzz. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks, Najeeb. Great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Before we talk about India vs England series, Rob, I want to ask you, tell me about the joy of supporting England team, because it's like I find it similar to supporting India in the sense that we lose some, we win some, and the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of following a team, which is not someone like, say, Australia of 2000s, right? I mean, for me, supporting Australia of 2000s must be very boring because they win everything. But there is some special joy in supporting teams like England and India at certain phases over the years. Pakistan, in a sense. Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I grew up during the 1990s is when I first started taking an interest in cricket, and England were rubbish during that time. The players who played themselves will tell you that. And it was you were, even a solitary test match win was like you'd take the rest of the week off because it was so unusual. So right. and I think then that makes you it does make you appreciate the good times all the better. So right. England typically at home are pretty good, but away they are pretty average. So we do have those ups and downs, and which makes the win, like in India in 2012 or in Australia in 2010-11, all the more they go down in the annals of English history because they're quite rare. So right. It's a roller coaster, but it's fun. As you say, I think it's probably more fun than just winning all the time. Definitely.
Exactly. Do you think England team right now is getting together and consolidating itself into a proper 11 that can consistently have the same 11 for next 2-3 years? Because I remember from 2018 series to up until 2019, there have been a lot of chopping and changing. Multiple openers tried after Alistair Cook. Do you think it's coming together now, especially after that wonderful South African series win?
Yeah, I do actually. I think they've got a way of playing that they want to stick with now under Chris Silver with the new coach, and they've got a group of players that they have identified to play that way. So it might not be the flashiest batsman opening the batting, but they've got people there now who they think can do the job, can do it the way they want to. Right. So the last 18 months has probably seen more progression than in the previous 5 years. In Test cricket, which was always very inconsistent. Now there's sort of a steady upward gradient. So I think they are coming together. I think they've got a good squad of players. Whether this series against India is going to come a bit too soon for them to really challenge, I probably think so. But they're definitely improving, particularly away from home. The 2 tests in Sri Lanka that they won, they've won now 5 consecutive away tests, and they haven't done that since 1911, I think. So they are improving. They're coming together, but they are still very much a work in progress. There's a lot still to go.
Maybe if this series of India might have come maybe 8 months down the line, maybe it would have been in a better shape, is what you feel?
Yeah, I think so, because the team is coming together, and another sort of 8 months, 12 months would have, I think, given them another level of experience, and they'd probably be in a better position. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how they cope, and if they can do well in India, even if they lost, it would still be a decent effort.
Right. Why do you think England lost last time around 4-0 when they visited India? What is different now? What was lacking back then?
Yeah, it's a good question. And in preparation for this series, I was going back through the scorecards and the reports of that series, and I think the bowling attack really struggled on that tour. I mean, England made 400 in the first innings, 3 out of the 5 test matches. But the bowling attack really did struggle. So, and I think particularly the spinners, quite inexperienced. I know Moeen Ali and Adil Rashid played, but at that stage of their career, they were still very inexperienced. and they picked Zafar Ansari and Gareth Batty as the third spinners. So I think the bowling attack really struggled. England have far better bowling attack now, I think, than they did then. So they've still got James Anderson, Stuart Broad, but they've got Jofra Archer now to give that pace option, which I think they've been missing. And although England's spin attack is still very much a work in progress, it is in Jack Leach. He is an experienced cricketer. He's proven to take wickets on spinning pitches and has actually still got a very good record at Test level. So I do think their bowling attack is better. But in 2016, I think that was the reason they struggled. And also they played 7 tests in that winter, 2 in Bangladesh first, then went straight to India. And by the end of the series, they were knackered. Alistair Cook resigned at the end of that tour, right? So, I think that played a part as well. But certainly the bowling attack for me, I think they struggled.
Right. You speak of how ragged England were. So how do you think England will go about rotation in this series? Because it's a long series, this one. It's not a short one. We have already seen in Sri Lanka that Broad and Anderson didn't play together in the couple of tests that they had played. So how do you think England will go about it with this, especially with these 2 pairs, the stalwarts?
Yeah, it's a good question. And if you asked James and Stuart, they would say we can play together, but I think there's a realization away from home that actually the variety in the attack and the balance of the attack is more important probably than at home. When at home you can pick the best seamers, your best 3 seamers, and with the assistants they can do the job. Overseas, I think England have finally come to the realization, and they should have come to this a few years ago, but they've taken the time, but they've got there, that they need more variety in the seam attack. So having right arm bowlers who bowl around 80 miles an hour, and a group of them isn't necessarily going to be that useful on away pitches. So I think potentially they may play together in the day-night test, which will be a fantastic occasion, but I think they might play there because the ball obviously potentially may move there more than anywhere else. But otherwise, I think there's a sort of the understanding that actually they'll probably play one or the other of James Anderson and Broad, and I think they're fine with that now. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
That is a test match that is giving me nightmares as an Indian fan, because under the lights, I remember Jimmy making the ball talk when he was in Australia in Adelaide, and we have seen how India had played in Adelaide just very recently. So that is a very interesting test match that I'm looking forward to out of the all series.
Yeah, that will be interesting, and you're right. In that Adelaide test in the 2017-18 Ashes, Anderson made the ball talk, and actually in the England played with West Indies in 2017 in a pink ball test at home, and again, the ball moved around a lot. So if the ball moves, Stuart Broad and James Anderson are 2 best in the world at getting something out of it. So yeah, it'd be an interesting game. That very interesting.
Right. What do you think of the debate of IPL versus Test matches, and some England players being fatigued because of IPL, and case being Johnny Bairstow, for example? What's your comment on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, but I think the IPL now is just a part of the calendar that it is something that just gets factored in with international cricket. So I don't see anymore that it's an IPL or an international cricket. I think the ECB particularly will look at the whole schedule and include the IPL in the schedule, and then say, well, we're going to rest players for this chunk or that chunk. So there is some talk in England, and certain people in England are saying, well, players like Bairstow are missing England duty to play in a franchise competition. Is that right? But I think whether it's right or wrong, it's just the reality. And also the IPL has been fantastic for English cricket. A lot of our players have gone there recently, in the last sort of 5-6 years. It's played a big part in the development of England's white ball cricket. And Owen Morgan, the white ball captain, is a massive proponent of players going to the IPL for the big stage and learning, from other players. So on the face of it, it might sound as if players are missing England duty to play in a domestic competition, but there are a lot of benefits as well. So it's not an easy decision.
Case being Josh Butler. I mean, Josh Butler on IPL, that's one example that we can point out. Moving on, how happy are you with the Root's form? Are you just jumping in joy? Because, Root has been taken out of the famous Fab Four for a little bit. I think Babar Azam came back. Now is it Fab Five? Is it back to Fab Four? What are your thoughts on that? And what was missing with Joe Root's play all these days? And what did he find in Sri Lanka all of a sudden?
Yeah, I think so. I would still definitely say Joe Root is in that that group with Kohli and Smith and Williamson, and I put Babar up there as well. But I think the last couple of years, a combination of factors. So one, Root has admitted probably for the last year that he's been struggling with his technique, particularly his trigger movements. So he thought he'd got that sorted at the start of last summer, but hadn't worked on it closely here before the Sri Lanka series, and feels in a better place. Now, he didn't really get tested that much with pace in Sri Lanka for obvious reasons.
Right.
So it will be a big test for him in India, where I expect the seamers to play a bit more of a bigger role. So that's one thing. And also he did say that has said that the conversion rate issue, people always say he gets to 50 but he never gets to 100.
Yes.
Which is slightly unfair. He's got 19 test match hundreds, but his conversion rate is not as good as Kohli's or Smith's. And he said he admitted that got into his head at times. And when he got to 50, he was then thinking, well, I need to get to 100. I need to get to 100. Otherwise, people are going to say again around the conversion issue. So I think a combination of those two things have played on his mind. But actually, when you look at it, he averaged last summer, when he said he's really wasn't feeling great at all, he still averaged 42. It's not as if he's averaging 25. He is averaging, most players would take 42 in England at the moment, when the ball moves all over the place. So it's all relative, but it was great to see him start the year in the way he did in Sri Lanka. And I don't think England cannot win this series in India unless Joe Root scores, I think, a couple of hundreds.
Yes.
So the pressure is on him, but I mean, he's made a great start to the year. He's in great form. So be really interesting to see how he goes.
Also the best player of spin in the England batting order right now. So his form is pretty much the key. And do you think his position in the batting order is also a factor, because it's been pretty confusing for him as well? Number 3, number 4, is he fixed now, or what's happening with that?
Yeah, I've lost count of the amount of times he's moved from 3 to 4 and 3 to 4 and 3 to 4. Right. And I think a part of that at the start was that he was trying to help other people and let other people fit in at 4, when maybe he should have just said, no, I'm batting at 4. That's where I like to bat. So he said that now for the last probably year, he's just said, I'm batting at 4. So even when Rory Burns missed the test series in Sri Lanka, for paternity leave, the option was for Root to move to 3 and then somebody else to fit in underneath him. But he said, no, I'm batting at 4. That's where I'm batting. So I think that's resolved for now. I think he's going to stay there.
Right. And what would you think would be the bowling combination of England? Because, India's pitches historically used to be the dust bowls that are spinner friendly, but India is not really India has their pace battery as well. So how do you think the pitches might be? What would be the bowling combination of England? Because if India starts making pitches friendly for their fast bowlers, which are absolute gems, do you think England will come up with 3 fast bowlers in their bowling lineup, or will it be 2 spinner, 2 fast bowler? What do you think is going to happen? How do you think the pitch is going to play versus the combination?
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. I think England are expecting, and I'm expecting, that the pitches won't be too seamer friendly, because if they are too seamer friendly, they're going to bring England into it, because England have got the pace bowlers to exploit those conditions. So I think England are expecting it to spin. But it will be interesting to see, because, as you say, India have got both bases covered. They've got fantastic spinners and they've got fantastic seamers. So, but I think England are going to play 2 spinners, that's every indication, unless they get to the ground and they see the pitch and they think there's a lot of grass on it or it's going to move around. But I think they will play 2 spinners. The advantage they've got is that Ben Stokes is obviously back, and he bats and obviously bowls, so he gives them an option to balance the team. Moeen Ali is fit again. Again, gives you an opportunity to play a spinner and a batsman and all-rounder.
Yeah.
So I do think they are going to play 2 spinners, but whether one of those spinners is Moeen or not will be interesting to see. And then they will go in with, I think, 2 seamers plus Stokes, so they will have effectively 3 seamers. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to see where England go. And I'm looking forward to the pitches, because I think if the pitches do have a bit for the seamers, it could be quite a tight series. But
Right.
if they are heavily spin dominated, I think India will be, very, very
Right.
much in the driving seat.
Right. And also Sri Lanka series, Sri Lankan batsmen make England spinners look good in the sense, like, to be fair. But do you think they're up for the task? Moeen Ali, Dom Bess, and Jack Leach. So what are they going to do? They're going to play Moeen Ali. Jack Leach will be a confirmed starter in the 11, right? Because of the left arm option against way too many right-handers in the Indian batting order. Along with Jack Leach, it either has to be Moeen Ali or Dom Bess, depending on the pitch, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my thought. I think they will just pick Leach for that left arm reason exactly, but also because he is the most, or well, certainly he is more consistent than Dom Bess at this stage.
Right.
Dom is a lot younger than Jack, so we've got to take that into consideration. But so Jack will play, and then it is a toss up, I think, between Dom and Moeen. Moeen hasn't had any match practice, obviously been ill recently with COVID.
Right.
Dom Bess got better in Sri Lanka, but again, by his own admission, did not bowl as well as he could. So I think, though, depending on how Moeen trains over the next couple of days, it would be very good for England to have that problem if he was available, because he's got 181 Test wickets.
Yes.
He's done relatively well in the subcontinent before with ball and bat
against
and
India.
he's experienced against India, exactly. So I think if he is fit, I wouldn't be surprised if they play Moeen and Jack in the first test at least.
Right. Since we are in subcontinent, we could not help ourselves but talk about batting. I think route is pretty sorted. It will be very interesting to see, because there are many people who are batting in India for the first time, right? I believe Rory Burns, Sibley, Crawley, all these folks. How do you think they're going to cope up? Would you be surprised if they do well? Are we expecting a surprise from the English batsmen?
Yeah, I think they are inexperienced. I think so. Rory Burns played 3 tests in Sri Lanka in 2018, so he's got a bit of experience. Zach Crawley obviously had a really difficult time in the 2 test matches just gone in Sri Lanka, while Dom Sibley worked it out towards the end, scored a decent half century. So, but I do think it's going to be a real baptism of fire for them. I think Sri Lanka's bowlers were steady, but no more than that. And the test is going up a level against India. So I think the one thing I would say around players like Crawley and Sibley and Burns is they're very quick learners, and they don't tend to make the same mistakes too often.
Right.
So we saw that in Sri Lanka with Dom Sibley in the last innings, scoring a half century and changing his technique. So I expect the same from Zach Crawley. And also we've got to throw in either whether Dan Lawrence plays or Ollie Pope in the middle order. Again, both of those are very inexperienced in these conditions. So I think that's one thing in England's favour, but there's no getting away. They're inexperienced. And I think that's why a lot of pressure is going to go on Joe Root and Ben Stokes. Stokes is a huge player for England in that middle order. But both of them are going to have really big series, I think.
Yeah. What would be your sample batting order in that sense? So we're going to open up with Sibley and Burns, followed by Crawley at number 3. Is that right? Or is it Barstow? What would be your batting order if you can, at the top of your head?
Yeah. So Sibley and Burns will open, Crawley at 3. So Barstow's been rested for the first 2 matches. So he's gone home, but he's coming back for the 3rd and 4th games. But it will be Crawley at 3, with Root at 4, Stokes at 5. And then it's a question of whether they will pick Buttler at 6 and then pick some all-rounders. So I think the only potential decision, I guess, is whether Dan Lawrence plays instead of Zach Crawley, or if Ollie Pope is fit, which is still in the balance.
Right.
Whether he might play instead of Zach Crawley, and one of those 3 players will bat at 3. But otherwise, it's pretty settled, I think.
Pretty set. And if Barstow comes back, what is the equation then? And he'll straight away slot in at number 3. That will be...
Well, that's interesting. So the selectors have said when he comes back, there's no guarantees of a place in the 11. So which is... Barstow's one of England's best players of spin in any format. So he would be pressing very hard for a position when he comes back. But if, let's say, Zach Crawley scores 100 in one of the 2 games, then I don't think Barstow will get back in. But if they don't, then it'll be great for England to have Bairstow back, because he is a very fine player of spin.
Right. Do you think they'll rotate between Archer and Wood? Because, sometimes Wood is better at reverse swing in that sense, because reverse swing is a bit of key in subcontinent. Or do you think only Archer will be in for all the tests? Fast bowling combinations is what I'm interested at, because under the lights, I'm pretty sure Anderson and Broad both will play together along with Stokes. That will be very interesting. Will they sit out Archer, Wood, both? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, so I don't think Archer will play all 4 tests. I don't think England will put him through that. They are very careful about managing him. And obviously, as you say, they've got Mark Wood back for the 3rd and 4th test matches. So
right.
I would expect Jofra to play the first 2 and then sit out the 3rd, which is the day-night, and then perhaps Wood to play in the 4th test. But I think the one thing England will have is they will look in the 3 tests, apart from the day-night, will look to have a genuine quick bowler in their attack.
Right.
So they have also got Ollie Stone from Warwickshire in the squad, and he bowls just as quick as both of those, Archer and Wood. So I think whatever side England pick, they are going to look to have that 90-mile-an-hour plus bowler. But I think it'll be a combination, and I think Jofra will probably play 2 out of the 4.
Right. Do you think this is one of the better England teams in terms of from the 2012 win? And do you think, do they have the capability to punch above the weight in that sense? And in India, a better challenge? It's not going to be 4-0. Do you think it's not going to be 4-0?
I don't think it's going to be 4-0, actually. I think England will be able to compete. But I don't, I put India very firm favourites. If you look at that 2012 team that won, this side is very much less experienced than that side. That side had a lot of experienced players. So I think they're in a different position now than that 2012 side were. But I do think they can compete. And I think if England compete on this tour, they'll be quite happy, actually. So I don't think it's going to be 4-0. I mean, the famous last words, but I don't think it will be that. But I think if England can win a test and push India in the other test matches, I think that will be a decent result for where this side are in their development. And, again, that will then probably set up the summer quite nicely when India come to England.
Speaking of India, do we even have to speak about India? Because you know what I mean, right? So they have come back from Australia, and the people that have won in Australia are going to sit out, and Kohli is going to straight away slot back in, Bumrah, Ishant. What do you think India will do? Will they be bold enough to go ahead and play 3 spinners? Because Jadeja is not playing around. So maybe have Kuldeep, Ashwin and Washington Sundar for the batting option with a couple of seamers. And India has done that in the past and in the subcontinent, right? They will just fancy that. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if they go in with three spinners. I mean, I know they have done that in the past, and again, a lot depends on the pitch, and we're not there, so we can't see that. But I would suspect they're going to pick 2 spinners. They've obviously also got Axar Patel with a left armer who potentially could come into the equation. So I think they'll pick 2 spinners, but I think the quality of their spinners is such that they probably don't need 3. Their spinners are good enough to keep control and to attack at the same time. And sometimes I think with 3 spinners, the 3rd spinner gets a bit underbowled. So a lot depend on the pitch, but I'm expecting India to play 2 spinners and then two quicks and see how they go. But I think the thing with India is whoever they pick, they seem to just have a stock of bowling options at the moment, right? Which is just fantastic.
Right. And would you play Pant as your keeper, or would you have Pant as a batsman with Saha as a keeper? What would you do?
Whatever happens, you have to have Pant in that team, right? You have to play him.
Absolutely.
So you have to play it. So again, it's interesting. If the pitches are very bowler friendly, that's when having a wicket keeper, a top class wicket keeper really does tell. And it was interesting. Ben Folkes did a press conference yesterday and said, when there's a time when you can probably get away with somebody who's not quite as specialised wicket keeper, when the pitches in Australia maybe are coming through, don't move as much. I'm a wicket keeper myself, so I'm a part of the Wicket Keepers Union. I would always pick the specialist wicket keeper just because I think it is a specialist position. And Sahar's a very capable batsman as well, right? It's not as if he's can't bat, but No, but whatever way India go, they've got to get Pant in that team, and they've got to keep him in. I mean, I can't. It was such a surprise to me where they left him out at the start of the Australia series. I couldn't get my head around that, but hopefully they won't do that again.
Right. If there's a chink in the armor of India, what would you target at that? Put on the hat of an England coach. What would you be looking at in terms of India's bowling, batting, where you're going to attack, where you're going to hurt them?
I mean, it's very difficult because India are such a well-rounded team, but I do think there is, coming off that Australia win, that was obviously a long tour, a lot of injuries in the bubble for a long time. They will have some players who were on that tour who were going to play.
Right.
So I think the way for England to attack India and to put them under pressure is to try and keep them in the field as long as possible when they bat.
Right.
Now, that's going to be easier said than done, but I don't think you can say India's batting is weak or India's bowling is weak. The way I think England will attack it is that they will try and keep India in the field for as long as they can. That does two things. Firstly, it will tire them out. And these players, rousing yourself again after such a big effort in Australia will be potentially quite difficult. Someone, even though, Ashwin, I don't know how many overs he bowled, but he bowled a hell of a lot of overs.
Right.
He's 10 days, he's back on the pitch again. So I think England will do that. And also England will try and get those big scores that then do put a batting order under pressure. It doesn't matter how good a batting order is. If you're staring at 500 on the first innings and you've got to bat next, a couple of mistakes and you can be conceding a pretty big lead. So that's how I think England will attack it. And that's not saying, there's any weakness in India. It's just that if England can keep them in the field, I think, that's the only way really that they're going to have success.
Right. Excellent. Last couple of questions, Rob. So players from England to watch out for. Who do you think will be the find of this series for England in that sense?
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the top order play, Zach Crawley particularly. And that might not be because he's one to watch, but he scored a double 100 during the summer. He is a very talented player. And he had a bad time in Sri Lanka, but I think actually he's a far better player than he showed there. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing him play. As long as he does play, I think he will have a better time because I think he will have learned from that. So I'm really looking forward to him play. And also Dan Lawrence, if he gets another opportunity in the team, he made a really good impression. He's an Essex boy like myself, so bit of a soft spot for people from players from Essex. And I'd be hopefully he gets a go in the team and can carry on where he left off in Sri Lanka.
Get a bit of cook in himself when he goes out to bat, hopefully.
Exactly.
Yeah? Right. Last question, Rob. What do you think? The numbers, the good old dreadful numbers. Is it 2-1, 3-1? You said not 4-0. Go ahead.
I think I hate doing these things because this is where someone's going to come back to me. But I reckon it will be. I think it'll be 2-1. I think there might be a draw, and I think England will potentially that day-night test. I'd fancy England on that, so I'll go with 2-1.
Excellent. That's it for this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Rob, for doing this. Hopefully, we have a great, interesting series. We have our expectations very high after that India-Australia. Hope this one lives up to that and sets it up for the upcoming summer in England. Thank you very much once again for doing this podcast, Rob.
No worries. Thanks. Enjoyed it.
That's it from the Sollu Kaburz podcast. We'll see you next time for another episode. Bye, everyone.